Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports, coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond in London, England, as well as Paris, France. Of course, you good old boys in Canada. We love you in Africa, the Big C tribe. But there's no one we love more than the good old boys down south in the land of the free and the home of the brave on a beautiful July the 30th, 2020. Rondo Deportes, Big C. How's it going for you good old boys down south?
Well, Charlton, today became the final day that John Lewis was taken home to his final resting place in the South, in the city of Atlanta, Charlton. You know, eulogized by many great dignitaries, 3 former presidents. And the battle that he led, who will pick up the torch and carry it from here? I want to say thank you to our frontline healthcare workers, Charlton, nurses, doctors, first responders. You are strong, you are brave, and no one can respect you more than we do.
That is a very well said, Big C. I want to say today's show is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, just tell them Charlton and Big C sent you, as well as a fleet of Cadillac cars also all around the world. Just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our sponsors. You will hear, welcome to the show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he will do his thing from 3,000 miles away. And I really appreciate the way things are growing with Big C Sports. You can follow Big C Sports on Spotify. You can follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast TV, Apple TV, Roku TV, Amazon Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. But you better have a smart TV or you'll be sitting there looking at a still picture. Man, I love pausing, Big C. It makes me feel good. I think everyone should pause at some moments in life to get yourself together. But I'll never pause on this Veterans Crisis Hotline. They really are experienced in helping veterans and their loved ones get help, Big C. Why is that so important to you?
Well, our National Suicide Prevention Hotline number, Charlton, is a great avenue for people to get mental and emotional help from. When we think about losing some 22 veterans a day to suicide in this country, a very horrific number, Charlton. Not only that, we're losing veterans to COVID-19, and people don't pay attention to either one of those, especially our administration. We're giving out the National Suicide Prevention Hotline number to each of our shows, Charlton. Here's our way to give our little bit to help humanity here in America, to help people think about those soldiers that have fought so admirably for this country, and for all of those people who say those people take a knee, get the hell out of the country, who never fought for this country, Charlton. But we lose these soldiers, and we should not have to. Our administration should be more assertive and attentive to the physical and emotional needs of those great veterans that have served this country.
Yep, I very well said, Big C. 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255, or you can text 838-255. That's 838-255. If you're online, simply go to veteranscrisisline.net. That's veteranscrisisline.net, and you can get some help. Also, very happy to be affiliated with Valley Homes Weekly TV on Dish TV, Direct TV, AT&T Uverse, TV 53, home of the San Francisco Giants and the Say Hey Kid. Just tell them Big C Central. The goal is simple: recruit 100 real estate brokers, put their property listings on TV just like McDonald's does it. Car dealerships are doing it, Big C, and then sports teams are doing it too. Tonight, NBA is tipping off in the COVID-19 season. Watch TV and real estate work for you. 800-772-8624. That's 800-772-8624. If you're looking for opportunities in real estate, go to bigcsports.pacwm.com. That's bigcsports.pacwm.com, and you can see about the opportunities. Big C, I love what you said earlier about the veterans. And you know, a veteran means you put in some time and you serve. I want to pay homage to U.S. Representative John Lewis and President Obama. You know, when you see class, when you see real class, Big C, not that fake stuff like someone has fake diamonds, real class, like real diamonds, you really notice when it's gone, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you know, when we think about the torch that John Lewis has carried for over 50 years here in America, Charlton, coming from, Troy, Alabama as a boy, somebody at 16 years old, when we think about racism in America, was not allowed to even get a library card.
Yeah.
Society wanted to hold Negroes back during that time. But John Lewis stayed the course, Charlton. He fought for what he believed in. He gained promise in this country. He rose all the way to the top to become a lawmaker. He did so much for people in this country that people don't even recognize as they go about their everyday chores in life.
Yeah.
But John Lewis, amongst many others, sacrificed so much. And you think about the three great civil rights leaders that we lost in the past couple of months, Charlton. And so there's nobody left from the March on Washington. John Lewis was laid to rest today in his adopted home of Atlanta, Georgia, Charlton.
Yeah.
Given his final resting place after being eulogized by so many great people, three former presidents
Yeah.
that had nothing but dignity and character, standing there talking about this man that they dealt with in life as professionals and in private. But, this is the type of character that he presented to the American public that we all should have a part of every day. You always talk about life and liberty and justice for all, Charlton.
Yeah.
He spent his life fighting for that. Even though we have not obtained that yet, he spent his life fighting for that. Now it's up to who's next that are willing to get in line and carry that banner that we had those great civil rights leaders of the 50s and 60s and 70s, Charlton,
Yep.
stumping for Negroes in this country to give them opportunity to continue on. Even though we should not have to do that as a culture, America should be free to all its citizens, but it's not. This is a country that you have to pay your way to get any place in, Charlton, and it's wrong. But John Lewis was a giant. He was a meek man in size, but he was a giant, Charlton, when you think about his accomplishments.
Yeah, I really appreciate especially when you can see President Barack Obama, the eulogy for John Lewis. He's, as much as anyone in our history, brought this country a little bit closer to our highest ideals. You think about former President Barack Obama delivered the eulogy, as you mentioned. And John Lewis, again, passed on July 17th after a decades-long career in the House of Representatives. Lewis, a civil rights icon, not just a civil rights icon, but the world can tell when you lost a diamond. If you ever lost a diamond, people go looking for it. And he's surely a diamond that the world has lost, Big C. Civil rights icon, led the 1965 March on Selma in Alabama across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Spoke at the March on Washington. Man, you think about Dr. King, and Lewis was there with Dr. King. People talk about I have a dream. Lewis was trying to keep that dream going forward, Big C. And when you think about voting rights and equality for black Americans, known as the moral conscience of Congress, Lewis lay in state for 2 days at the Capitol. But it's just like, have you ever had something that you lost and it was so valuable to you that you kept looking for it? It was not like you dropped a penny on the ground and you know it's just a penny, I'll keep walking. But you ever lose something that's so valuable that you keep looking for it, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, as a culture, we have continuously lost battles as a culture. And we keep striving, trying to find the end of the road, Charlton, to find that promised land. Not before we go over to the other side, but we try to find that promised land while we're here on earth. We struggle every day as a culture looking for that. And we try to find out why the oppression still exists after 400 years of being in this country, that there's still an oppression. What is the fear of Negroes in America from other cultures, Charlton? That's the one thing we're trying to find out. That's what's lost. That's what's truly lost. And we're trying to find what is the ultimate fear from white people in America to keep oppressing black people.
Yeah, and I always want to make sure, because when I think about President Bush, President Clinton, Madam Speaker, they're white, and they are not trying to oppress black Americans. There's always good and bad, and I want to make sure that I don't throw them under the bus for the kind of things they're trying to do. Madam Speaker, President Clinton, President Bush, Reverend Warnock, Reverend King, John's family and friends, beloved staff, Mayor Bottoms out of Atlanta, Big C, They came here because they wanted to make sure, like so many other Americans, they owe a great debt to John Lewis and his vision for freedom. And just like the ocean waves, it's a back and forth push, and equality is the same. It's a back and forth push. There's always good and evil. So oftentimes when I'm told, why do bad things happen to good people? And sometimes good things happen to bad people. There is day and night in this world. There's good and evil in this world. And maybe that's the way the good Lord planned it, Big C. We'll always have to push for it. But I really appreciate when someone like John Lewis made some strides that made my life better. So I'm not going to say he didn't do anything to make my life better, because he has. And a lot of people of color, they can see the same thing. And I just hope going forward, you ask who's that next person. I think we all are that next person. The people who see possibilities. If people don't see possibilities, just have them leave the room. If they see possibilities, then join the same spirit that John Lewis had. And that's our hope, that we have people who believe in creating the change. Just like the ocean, it's a back and forth tide, but we need people who are believers, not doubters. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, it's not about doubting, Charlton, and to pay homage to those people who stand on the front line, regardless of race or culture, Charlton, who do the right thing. It's great to always acknowledge those. But can you find those people who oppose those people who stand on the front line? Those are the people who make the true difference. To see former President Bush, Clinton, Speaker of the House Pelosi, those people are resonating about what they do in good deeds.
Yeah.
But they're not the majority. It's just like they say, one person, one vote. They're only one person. We're talking about the masses who create the problem in America, not those who oppose it, because there's not enough who oppose it to defeat the masses who create the problem. And so there's always going to be people working across the aisle regardless of culture.
Yeah.
But it's those who don't and who are unwilling to work across the aisle. You didn't see Mitch McConnell sitting there.
He's the devil.
From the Senate.
He's the devil.
He wasn't there to serve it.
He's the devil, Big C.
So those are the people that are in power that I'm talking about, that oppose the opportunity for Negroes to advance.
Yeah, and his time is coming to an end. And also want to pay homage, just thoughts and prayers to Herb Cain's family. Also, he passed from COVID-19. He was at a Trump rally without a mask. So when you follow somebody who's leading you down the wrong road, you do it at your own demise. But I still offer thoughts and prayers. It's just hard to offer sincere thoughts and prayers to somebody who brags about being ignorant. And when you stand next to a person who's ignorant and is willing to sacrifice you like a kamikaze, and you want to stand there and offer thoughts and prayers, I feel a little bit disingenuous also, but I still want to offer thoughts and prayers, even though sometimes, man, I just appreciate what John Lewis did for this country. And when I see presidents that are there at his service, and there's one, devilish of a person who wasn't there, and God knows who that person is, and there's a reason he wasn't there. Evil people feel bad when they're in good company, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you can never expect a kind word from the Oval Office, Charlton. There was no acknowledgement from the White House today about John Lewis's service. There was only one tweet about his passing 2 weeks ago, Charlton. So as you think about the lack of leadership that we have in this country from an individual who's self-serving, who wanted to spend last week on the phone with Vladimir Putin and talking about the elections being fixed, versus paying homage to somebody who has done so much greatness for this country, even more than what he's ever done.
Yeah.
So this is the selfishness that we deal with as a culture.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean when I was making the statement earlier. Why does this white guy feel so hard against black people in America?
Why does a rattlesnake bite people, Big C? That's just what they do. There was a story called The Scorpion and the Frog, and I know many people have heard it. There was a scorpion and a frog, and the frog asked the scorpion for a ride. I think the scorpion asked a frog for the ride, and the frog said, "Are you sure you won't sting me?" He said, "No, I won't sting you." And so he gives the scorpion a ride. The scorpion stung him, and the frog said, "Trump, why'd you sting me?" He said, "I'm a scorpion. That's what I do, Big C." And people got to recognize the difference of a scorpion and not wonder why it is. Nature made it that way. There's good and evil. I do want to say, again, final thoughts on John Lewis. I just appreciate everything he's done. I think our sports show, to pat ourselves on the back a little bit, we don't always agree, and that's fine. At the same time, we don't wait until someone passes away to start talking about social justice and equality and other things that are important to every American. And I agree with what you said earlier. For all you dumb guys, if I ever hear anybody else say, get out of this country if you don't stand for something, please show me where you fought for the country. If you did not fight for this country, shut the hell up. You have no reason to tell anybody anything. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, the words of people that my grandfather fought for this country, my great-grandfather fought for this country, all you have to do is turn the page, and most of everyone's grandfather or great-grandfather fought for this country, Charlton.
Yeah.
So everyone that has been in this country for 100 years has a vested interest in the military service through their family history.
Yeah.
So to berate somebody for things that go on now, look at all the atrocities that drove people to doing what they're doing now as far as revolting.
Yeah. And you can right now enlist. They'll take it. You can even take out garbage. You can do something to serve this country other than just giving lip service. Again, but life must go on, and we have to keep going forward. Big C, I want to jump over to the NCAA. Plain rules. Think about, there's so much, you always talk about, why is there opposition? Like, why is there opposition to common sense? That's a good question. Not everybody has common sense, Big C. But the NCAA, the plain rules, the oversight panel, they announced today that it will allow players to make social justice, commemorative, and memorial statements, Big C, as well as other messages on their jerseys for the 2020 season. That's like letting someone write their name on the back of the jersey as they walk into a burning house. But the current NCAA rules, in most of sports, it prohibits any type of patchwork to be worn while they're doing sports, and they're trying to open up a little bit of change for that, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, I think that comes about, Charlton, from the laws that are being passed where players can make money off their name and likeness in college sports. And so the NCAA is trying to get out in front of that. They're throwing out there an olive branch, Charlton,
yeah,
because they're going to try to find a way in the upcoming seasons to take a little bit of that money away from players. So they're trying to be a little bit disingenuous in making this offer to allow players to make statements about social justice. The NCAA has been one of the greatest oppressors in the United States, Charlton, for decades.
Yeah.
If you look at how they've systematically controlled the athletes and not allowing them to earn a living.
Antitrust.
And condemning athletes when they went out and got a free meal, compared on the millions of dollars that coaches are making off the backs of these athletes.
Yeah.
So, it's nice in a way, but I think it's disingenuous because the NCAA does not give something when they don't want something back.
No, they don't want something back. I was watching this documentary last night, and it's on a well-known rapper. I'm not going to give out his name, but at the same time, he had sought the advice of Michael Jackson in deciding how he could put together his own contract, because a lot of these music people, they get taken. I mean, they get the money stolen from them before they even see it. They have them sign a contract. Here's $1 million, but you owe back $5 million. People only see the million. They don't see the $5 million they owe back, so they live their life in debt. But he told them that he wanted to have 85% of everything that he did. And he's a black man, and he did pretty well for himself, but he came from some tough times also. But, it's just part of the give and take, like the ocean. There's a current that comes in and one that runs out. I want to talk about another current. It's an undercurrent, though. An internal or an external review of Iowa football program, the Hawkeyes, it concluded that racial and cultural bias had diminished the value and cultural diversity, according to a 28-page report it released by a Kansas City law firm. That's about the University of Iowa. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, this program has been led by Kurt Ferentz for over a decade, Charlton. And so he's been culpable in this type of undercurrent activity that has occurred, and he's allowed it.
Yeah.
They had to get rid of their strength and conditioning coach
Yep.
because of racial epithets and things that he was doing and demeaning of players, Charlton. And so this has been going on for a long time. Isn't it ironic that a lot of the bad news is going on now in college football is coming out of the Big Ten? We had Michigan State having to quarantine. You had Rutgers having to quarantine, and one other school out of the Big Ten having to quarantine. Now it's coming out what Iowa has done to its players systematically, its Negro players systematically during Kurt Ferentz's watch, Dalton.
Yeah.
And how can you allow coaches to stay at universities when these situations have continuously occurred under their watch? You're going to say that they're blind to all the actions that's going on?
Yeah, they're blind.
There's never been a complaint from a player or
Never.
players transferring
Yep.
and telling why? But as long as that paycheck is good for you, you really don't care about the players, and it's been self-evident of it.
Yeah, it's self-evident, Big C. A lot of things are self-evident. Just like day and night is self-evident, it's what people do that comes out in the light, Big C. A former Michigan student says the football program, their most famous coach, Bo Schembechler, he knew about sexual misconduct of then team doctor, I think his name was Robert Anderson. The accuser worked as a play-by-play announcer. This for Michigan Wolverines back in the days of the 1980s. They had a lot of good programs back under Bo Schembechler, Big C, but oftentimes when people see a person of his stature, just like Joe Paterno over at Penn State, even though they were an independent at the time, they really don't want to question the authority, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, this is one of 56 lawsuits that have been brought against the University of Michigan and their former doctor for sexual abuse and misconduct. And just like I said with Kurt France, there was no way that Bo Schembechler went 20 years and not knowing of any of these actions that have occurred. There's a former player right now, Charlton, who is dying of colon cancer. He was a tight end on that 80-81 Michigan team.
Yeah.
And because of the sexual assault that happened to him during the physical examinations that players must go through every year, as a grown man, he had a fear, a phobia of going to a doctor to have his colon checked out,
Wow.
and have a colonoscopy. And because of that, Charlton, of that fear that was instilled in him while he was at the University of Michigan, he ended up catching colon cancer, Charlton, and it's beyond, having surgery about.
Yeah.
But you look at the harm that this man did over the years while he was at Michigan with impunity, that you could sexually assault. And people only think for many times that only females get sexually assaulted.
Right.
No, these young men were being sexually assaulted. They were under scholarship. They didn't know who to talk to, where to turn to. And we're talking about a time when you didn't have Facebooks and cell phone and all this other stuff, Charlton,
Yeah.
where they could communicate. And if you were coming into a major college program, it was sort of an embarrassment to you
Yeah.
that something like this had happened, and you didn't want to be out there saying, hey, the guy did this to me, and having people look at you in odd ways. That was the part of society that we lived in back in those times, Charlton.
Yeah.
But you can never tell me that there's a head coach in any program. You spoke about Paterno. We're talking about Bo Schembechler. We saw all of what happened at Michigan State with Nassar.
Yeah.
So any time that there's sexual assault against a male or female athlete, there is somebody of power above that doctor who knows about it.
Yeah, it's always about power, and sometimes they're telling us, boys, look, we hold the key to your dreams, and if you want your dreams, you got to sell yourself to the dark side, if that makes any sense. The devil, I don't know why they call it the dark side. It should be the bright side, the light side. It don't make any sense. NCAA, they extend the size of football sidelines, the area on the sideline, Big C. College football teams, they used to congregate in those sections. Now I guess they're going to extend it by 20 yards this season, and only one captain from each team would be permitted to participate in the pregame or overtime coin toss. But to me, it's like saying I'm going to go to the swimming pool and I'm not going to get in the pool, so therefore I won't get wet. But the guys who are on the sideline, that's not the concern. It's the guys that are tackling, blocking, and tackling each other. They can't keep those safe. They just got to close their eyes and hope for the best, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, if you're realistically looking at it, that box was 40 yards. It went from 30-yard line to 30-yard line. That's the normal box for football players.
Yeah.
Okay, you're extending it 20. And the last I checked, college teams have in excess of 100 players.
Yeah.
So if you're standing yard to yard, Charlton, you're still overlapping each other. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You have not created 6 feet of space. 6 feet is 2 yards, okay?
Yeah.
So every 2 yards you can only put a player if you're talking about social distancing.
Yeah.
But it's back to what you said when you're down in the pits and you're snorting and you're sneezing and you're coughing
all that
and
stuff.
breathing hard on that guy that's a yard away from you.
Grabbing things.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
And that's what they're not addressing. Sending one captain out on the field doesn't make any difference. Charlton, all the rest of the guys are shoulder to shoulder on the sideline.
Yeah.
And when you look at the width of a football player with his shoulder pads on, that's 3 feet, Charlton.
Yeah.
3 feet, especially for linemen.
Yeah.
And so I don't know how they're talking about safety. Everything we hear that the NCAA is doing, it's not addressing safety.
No, no, they address it. They just couldn't care less. They covered up, Big C. It's like the scorpion and the frog. The scorpion said, you'll be safe if you let me get on your back and get me across the water, I promise you'll be safe. Like they're saying, you'll be safe with COVID-19 playing football, but we're going to make sure the people on the sidelines are separated from each other. Big C, doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Colorado State volunteered. Think about it, Big C. They paused the Rams team activities to help prevent the spread of COVID-19. And Colorado State has, I think, 8 COVID-19 tests that came back of 140 administered since testing began last month. The Scorpion and the Frog, the Scorpion said, trust me. Just trust me. I won't sting you, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, it seems to be a common theme when we're talking about these college football teams, is that they're coming back positive with COVID-19.
Yeah.
Just like in baseball. And we think about the distancing in baseball. These players are distant from each other.
Yeah.
And except when they're at home plate generally or at first base.
Yeah.
But we're looking at college football where there's no way to social distance. I mean, what do? Send 3 players into the shower at one time? Okay, 3.
Yeah.
10 minutes later, 3 more.
It come
but
back.
That's what you're going to do?
Yeah.
You know, tell me, what do you do when you get into a huddle?
Yeah.
Because the last time I checked, you got 11 guys bent over breathing at each other in the huddle.
Yeah.
Getting the play call from the quarterback.
Yeah.
Who's yelling out, so people can hear.
Yeah.
This is the problem they're not addressing. You can talk about the sideline issues that you brought up. But what do you do about those 11 guys that are in the huddle that are shoulder and elbow against each other, waiting on the play to be called out?
Yeah, it's the Scorpion and the Frog, Big C. And I know everybody has their own way. They can't wait to see some type of football, and they want to make sure. I mean, that's just part of it. And speaking of football, I want to go down to your neck of the woods. When you think about the SEC, Southeastern Conference, they said they will only play conference games. I know they did that so Alabama could get out of the USC game, Big C. That's my own opinion. But they're going to allow them to play conference games. And what they're also going to do is they're going to scrap the ACC, SEC teams that play in different conferences but the same state, like Georgia Tech, one's ACC, one's SEC. They're going to scrap that game. I think the Clemson's going to be scrapped with the South Carolina. And I think there's several other programs that are not going to be able to play each other because they're in the same state, but they're not going to let them go out of the conference. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you think about those games, Charlton. Those are big-time rivalry games when you talk about Clemson and South Carolina,
Yeah.
Georgia Tech. These games have been played for
years.
Eternity, seem like.
Yeah.
And so when you're in an opposing conference and you're an in-state rival, these are big things. And not just here in the SEC that you're talking about, Charlton. Look all across the country where you have teams that are in opposing conferences, but they play each other.
Yeah.
And this has been historical as far as state rivalries. They've played for, certain types of trophies
Yep.
and things like that over the decades. And so players, I mean, you've grown up against each other your entire life, from Pop Warner,
Yeah.
high school, now college, and now for once in an opportunity, you're not going to be able to see each other.
Yeah, it's the Scorpion and the Frog. Greg Sankey, he's the commissioner of Big C. He says that he believes the schedule adjustment offers the best opportunity to complete a full season by giving them the ability to adapt. And that's part of adapting. Everything's about adapting. I think Oklahoma was supposed to play Tennessee this year. That was a big, interconference game that people were looking at. The Big Ten and the Pac-12, they've already announced plans to play only conference games. So we'll be missing the USC Notre Dame game for the first time in decades. They've always played that game, Big C, but that's going to be gone. But also, just to make sure, the ACC wanted to allow 4 of its schools to maintain in-state rivalry games with SEC. That's Georgia Tech, Florida State, that's SEC, ACC, Clemson, South Carolina, Kentucky, and Louisville. They've all been canceled. So can you imagine how much moonshine is going to go to waste, Big C, canceling those games?
But, you think about that, Charlton, and you try to make rationale of that when it's a conference only.
Yeah.
And these teams are in the same state. You're not leaving the state. So that's what makes it, unpractical when they do that in certain situations like that. It probably would be safer to play a team in your own state than traveling to another state that may be a hotbed at that time.
Yeah, what they're doing, in my opinion, before the Big C pause, is when you have a team come in, they got to take home some money. So if you keep that money in the same conference, you keep that money in-house. The SEC does not want to see any money, not even a penny, go over to the ACC or those other conferences. I think that's why they're doing that, Big C. We'll take what's called the Big C timeout, also known as the Big C pause. And when we come back, Big C, you ever see a check engine light that came on a vehicle and you kept driving anyway? We'll take a Big C pause. We'll come right back and see if the check engine light is still on. All right, we are back from the Big C timeout, also known as the Big C pause. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. There's so many applications that you can follow Big C Sports, and I really appreciate the way things are growing with Big C Sports. I want to get into the NBA. You know, the NBA starts tonight, Big C, officially, if you can call it officially. That's like an oxymoron. We're going to officially start a season that's been already changed, and we're going to have to adapt to change. Life is about changing. NBA owners, as they face the reality of a sea of red ink, Big C, playing in empty or near empty arenas for the COVID-19 2020 season, some NBA owners, if you can believe it or not, you know, those honest guys, they're quietly preparing to find cash to weather the storm. Earlier in the summer, NBA Commissioner Adam Silver told that roughly 40% of the league revenue comes from ticket sales and arena sponsorships as he prepared them for the challenges ahead. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, you and I have talked about that over the past couple of weeks. That the Negroes need to go out and form their own league.
Yeah.
There's no better time than now with the financial strife that's going on, and the owners are losing power when they talk about empty arenas. If you got empty arenas now, you go out and build your own foundation. The owners are already telling you how they're going to go out and secure loans.
Yeah.
And, you know, they're going to go out and get $500 million loans to be able to pay salaries and things like that.
Yeah.
So this is an opportunity for the players. But you think about the league struggling. You play off of emotion when you play a game. The fans, the butts in the seats are what drive. You knock down a 30-foot three-point shot, Charlton, it's electricity in the arena.
Yeah.
You turn off the lights and they still won't go out because of all the juice that's flowing.
Yeah.
So as you look at the players and the owners getting ready for potentially what will be there in 2021, when you don't have a full season, and they're talking about starting it later, Charlton, once this season ends, think about the short break period you have. They're talking about starting up the NBA season November or December at the end of this year. Yeah.
They're always talking about we're gonna go to the banks and get a loan so we can pay for your talent. And if those guys would put them, they got every black American, just like the rapper that I told you there was a documentary. They had some white guys down in L.A. They said, "Listen, boy, if you want to make it in this industry, you got to sign with us because we have all the contacts." But he reached out to Michael Jackson, and Michael Jackson told him it's about the contract, not who you sign with. He ended up signing with them anyway for distribution purposes, but he signed the contract that Michael Jackson told him to sign. He made a lot more money than what he would have made. He said, if this guy's going to offer me $1 million, then I'm probably worth $100 million, and maybe some of the NFL players and NBA players will understand too. I gotta ask you something. When you think about some of the things we talk about, there's a disgusting habit also that NFL quarterbacks and college board quarterbacks, they're going to have to change with this COVID-19 season. And I know grabbing the crotch is one thing, Big C, but it might be something else they got to change. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, when you think about, Charlton, what quarterbacks have an instinct to do is lick their fingers on their hands. Constantly.
Yeah.
And where does a quarterback put his hand when he's up under the snap?
What's he licking?
To get the snap. And so, you know, we're talking about a hand that's going to be licked and sweat from the process of spinner on a play. And even if he's sitting in the shotgun, Charlton, that center is dripping perspiration all over that football.
His finger
while
looking
he's
good.
Making adjustments and calls. It's running down his hands, dripping off his chin. So these players, I mean, you watch quarterbacks on all levels. One of the things they do instinctively is lick their hands all the time. Is to create a little tackiness on the football. And so think about how many quarterbacks, Charlton, are going to end up with COVID-19 from licking footballs this year.
I told you, there's a friend of mine, she was having a conversation with her husband, and she said, "Honey, there's something I want you to do for me." And he said, "What is that?" So she whispered in his ear what she wanted him to do. And he said, "Well, I'm not comfortable doing that." And she said, "Well, my old boyfriend, he did it all the time, and she just wanted to lick your hand after the chicken, so instead of using napkins, Big C."
Well, it's one of those things. You look at the 113-page, COVID manual that came out for Major League Baseball when they were talking about no spitting, no chewing gum, no chewing sunflower seeds, no high-fiving. The things that they're telling baseball players that they have to stay away from, you can't keep a quarterback away from that in football.
No, you can't.
There's no way that these quarterbacks that have licked their fingers their entire life, Charlton, are not going to lick their fingers. I mean, watch Drew Brees. He licks his hands 3 or 4 times every time he comes up to the center. Tom Brady does it. Mr. Mahomes does it. Everybody does it. Aaron Rodgers. They all go to their mouth, Charlton, and lick their fingers.
Yeah, I think Drew Brees has an excuse because down in New Orleans they have a lot of good food. His finger-licking good food, Big C. So he's probably eating on the sideline and then coming back into the game. But think about it. There's a NFL medical boss is not surprised with positive COVID-19 cases and people opting out. And he's the chief medical officer, says it's not surprising there have been positive tests for COVID-19 among players. His name is Dr. Alan Seals. And he knows that the disease is cutting across the football just like it is across the country. And they're trying to share, their positive outcomes with other sports leagues all over the world, whether it's soccer or basketball and baseball. I mean, they talk about sharing information with officials from baseball, basketball, hockey as they restart Big C. It's reached out to worldwide leagues to discuss issues with the Premier League in England, Bangladesh, and Germany, Australian rules football. So they know that people are going to have a reason to test positive, and they just hope that they're going to find a way to figure it out and get people healthier again. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you think about 2 offensive linemen, Charlton, that opted out on the season. They both were teammates in New England 3 years ago. Marcus Cannon, a tackle. Nate Soder, who is with the Giants now, a tackle. Both of those men were cancer survivors. And people don't understand how many illnesses that football players have had. I mean, because you have great medical people around you all the time, they're able to catch these things in their early stages. And that's what happened for Nate Soder and Marcus Cannon. So they know the risk of being at high risk, so they chose to leave the season. Nate Soder's leaving $9 million on the table. But he's saying, what can I do with $9 million if I get COVID and I can't recover from it?
Well, there is some good news, too, because, knowing people that work in medical also, there's some results where people are actually, they're starting to find, there's medical science, and it's starting to work in some cases. There's a COVID patient that actually went home after being the first to receive a double lung transplant, Big C. 28-year-old Chicago resident Myra Ramirez became the first recipient of a double lung transfer and survived from COVID-19. Medical science will cure a lot of things if we just give it a chance. Big C, your thoughts?
But you think about this, Charlton, and I've constantly spoke about it, the scarring of the lung, the lack of air capacity that it hits people with COVID-19. This is the reason why they need respirators. And once you get on a respirator, you have to be incubated because you can't function with that tracheal tube down your throat, Charlton, so they have to incubate you. And you become weaker because you're laying on your back. Miss Ramirez, who went home today in Chicago, 28 years old. Unfortunately, Charlton, for her to receive that double lung transplant, some other person had to lose their life for her to receive that transplant. And she was in a coma for a long time, Charlton. When they brought her out, she found out why she was still alive because she had been able to receive this double lung transfer. But think about this. This is a 28-year-old person, not a 78-year-old person. A 28-year-old person, Charlton, that lungs had failed them from COVID-19. That's about the average age of an NFL player, about 28 years of age. So we're talking about people in the prime of their lives at 28 years old that loses the function of their lungs.
And we know that happens in life, but I think the light at the end of the tunnel is she's still alive today because of medical science and breakthroughs. And I think if we're going to find a way to cure anything, we got to look at the people that were able to save that life as opposed to saying, hey, our thoughts and prayers are with you. So wish her a very, speedy recovery, and hopefully people don't have to go down that same road. But I did want to ask you, every now and then, if you ever been driving a car, sometimes the check engine light comes on, and you think, what in the world? Why would the check engine light? I just had the tune-up last week. Check engine light come on, and some people keep driving and say, oh, it'll go off. It'll go off on its own, Big Z. Other people take it back to the dealer and say, what the world's going on? Well, there's an outbreak in tantrums and opt-outs in Major League Sports. they attempt to restart amid this pandemic while the check engine light is on. As the National Basketball Association prepares to restart the season, Adam Silver acknowledged that the season likely would cease completely if a COVID-19 outbreak occurred within the league's carefully crafted pandemic bubble. Remember, it was the NBA that started everybody opted out anyway, Big C. But Silver's not going to be in that bubble, but they are saying they're going to stop it if it... I mean, that's not true because some people already tested positive. So how many positives do they need before they opt out, Big C, your thoughts?
Well, what it comes down to, what does Silver do if he gets one or two players that test positive? He pulled the plug, Charlton, as soon as he had one player, Rudy Gobert, test positive.
Yeah.
So now that you have everybody in a bubble, you can't say that there's any social distancing anymore.
No.
Not like just two teams in that arena, Charlton. You have everybody in that same facility.
Yeah.
So what would the NBA do? I know everybody's going to say, well, we got safeguards in place, and, we've analyzed what the potential is. But if you stopped it for one player, Charlton,
yeah.
If you get two players, there's no way you can continue on.
Big C, it's the scorpion and the frog. In order for that scorpion to get it right, it had to convince the frog that it would be safe. Trust me, if anything goes wrong, I won't sting you. But the scorpion, they meant to sting people. Tonight's NBA schedule, Utah, they're playing New Orleans. The LA Clippers playing the LA Lakers. Those games are going to be on TNT. And then Friday's game is also Orlando at Brooklyn, Memphis at Portland. And then Phoenix will play Washington, Boston, Milwaukee, Sacramento, San Antonio, Houston, and Dallas. And the Sacramento Kings owner, Ravek Ranadive, they have an announcement coming on Friday. They're going to lay some people off, some staffers, because they're not there selling popcorn and libations and peanuts. And it's going to happen all over the league, Big C, where they just say, we got to let people go, but thanks for that TV money. They're not going to take any of that TV money and pay some of the people that would have made some money through concessions, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, as we look out and see, the owners are in it for themselves.
Yeah.
And the reason why these teams are playing, Charlton, is so that they can make that revenue.
For the owners.
They're getting the TV money from this because these games are going to be broadcast.
Yeah.
And it's going to be at least two games broadcast every night on television. So they're getting optimum return on their investment, Charlton, from television revenue.
Yep.
The players are just going to get their normal dollar.
Yeah.
But without having butts in the seat, and you talked about it earlier, that 40% of the revenue comes from fans being able to attend the game. You think about the concessions, you think about the parking, you think about all the paraphernalia that people buy, the food, Charlton. A lot of money is being missed.
Yeah.
And so players, they have to look at this from that perspective also. Where is the salary cap going to be over the next couple of years?
Yeah, well, like the lady said, where's the beef? They got to ask, where's the beef, Big C? And it's not just NBA basketball, and I feel for those guys, but when you tell someone who makes a living in concessions, we're going to get the contract, so those people are happy. Hey, we're going to get sports back, Big C. They're going to get sports back, and then they're told with the money the owners are going to make from sports, these guys are already billionaires, they're going to lay off people who make very minimum. The people that feed people up in the stadiums, they're going to lay them off. Major League Baseball, their check engine lights on. Major League Baseball, Philadelphia Phillies canceled all activities for the game against the Toronto Blue Jays tonight. Was it because they didn't get anyone to show up and feed popcorn? No, it's because of COVID-19. Check engine light on. At least they're starting to pause. But would you believe they're trying to wait for some type of clearance to start up again? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, the Toronto Blue Jays can't catch a break. They got kicked out of their own country.
Get out!
Yeah. They can't even find a place to play in the U.S. And then they show up in Philadelphia, where we just saw the Marlins leave. And the Marlins today, I think, is up to 19 players now that have tested positive for COVID-19.
Yeah.
Trying to get into that same stadium. And now the Phillies players are testing positive for COVID-19.
Yeah.
So you got to look at Rob Manfred. I mean, this is a guy that's playing Russian roulette right now with a bunch of players.
Yeah.
When do you decide, Rob, just pull the plug and say, hey, we're going to give everybody a year's service for attempting to play this season.
Yeah.
But we can't go out there and risk any more athletes.
Big C, the scorpion and the frog. I want to ask you a question. There's no right or wrong answer. But the universe is listening. The scorpion and the frog, which one would be the scorpion and the frog, the NBA players or the commissioners? Which one's the scorpion and which one's the frog, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, I'm going to go back to that point you made earlier. You said, why do rattlesnakes bite you? The rattlesnakes bite you because you won't leave him alone.
Won't leave him alone.
He's not asking you to trust him.
Yeah.
He's letting you know, I'm right here, back away. If you come any closer, I'm going to bite you.
I would have bite you. You come any closer. Some people go closer anyway. And speaking of rattlesnakes, you know, POTUS, of all rattlesnakes, Big C, this one wears a suit and tie. POTUS says that he believes that they're going to be a mail-in fraud, Big C. He talked about fraud. That's how you got into office. And he said it's going to be the crookedest election you've ever seen. So he's already tipped in his hand, like a poker player doesn't tip their hand, but he's tipped in his hand. And he's talking to Putin again. But he's trying to get them to do away with people having a mail-in ballot. And he wants the elderly people to get out there and try to vote so he can send in his federal troops like he did in Portland. They're being kicked out of Portland. They want to also plan that on the night of the election to take elderly people who want to vote and scare them from standing in lines for 2 hours. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you know, what he says, Charlton, really doesn't make any sense other than to the people who've always believed in him. But to sit there and say there's going to be hundreds of millions of fraudulent ballots that would be mailed in. I think we only had 230 million people vote the last election, Charlton. So I don't know how he's figuring we're going to get hundreds of millions of fraudulent ballots. And he's not only that, Charlton, he's slowing down the mail from the post office. He's trying to actually close the post office. I would not be surprised to see the post office close on November 1st or somewhere close to that, Charlton.
Yeah.
To avoid the mail from being delivered and processed. But when you have a guy who is telling you his playbook all the time,
yeah,
it's not often a thief will tell you how he steals. He won't show you his playbook.
Yeah. Yeah.
But every day that he opens his mouth, this thief shows you how he works.
Yeah.
And people keep buying into it.
Yeah.
But, you know, now people are finally calling him out from what he is. He doesn't have the ability to shut down the election. That takes an act of Congress.
Yeah.
And he's not smart enough to understand that. That's something that William Barr can't do for him.
Yeah.
So he's on his own when it comes to that.
Yeah.
But to sit there and say that many people are going to go out and do something fraudulent, people never heard of fraud till he showed up.
Yeah. Maybe if he would just open his tax returns, we can see if he's been frauding anybody, if that makes any sense. I think POTUS is going to open his tax returns on August 1st. So August 1st, POTUS is going to show his tax return to all the voters in the United States of America. He's going to show everybody how honest he is. And I believe he's going to do it, Big C. I do believe he's going to show his tax returns to the United States of America on August 1st so we can all see how honest and decent he is, Big C. I want to touch on a little bit how we were talking about NFL football and some of the things that are going on. NFL football check-engine light came on for the Buffalo Bills. Would you believe they sent some rookies home after they saw some positive tests, COVID-19. This is Orchard Park, New York, Big C, and we know New York's been hit hard earlier, but they sent home rookies from the team's facilities today as a response to they had 5 positive COVID-19 tests this week, Big C. 5 on one team, one facility, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, this is just status quo for the NFL. Every team is going to have positive tests. If they have not showed them, all they got to do is say they're there. But there's no way you can control COVID-19 in the NBA this year, Charlton, because there's just too many bodies that are side by side, sweating and dripping on each other.
Yeah, so why they want to send kids into school if adults got to be sent home in council leagues, but they want to send in young people to schools? I mean, it's all fair and love and war. But I do believe that POTUS will share his tax returns. You know, part of the reason that Mitch McConnell didn't pass that bill to give Americans the extra $600 that they needed, and POTUS said they're still working on that, but he wouldn't tip his cap on how they're still working on it. But we know that's part of business, Big C. I want to ask your thought on NFL football before we come up on the close, Big C. Everybody's talking about we want to get football back, whether it's college or professional. But the NFL came out and they voted on the top 4 players in the league. They had Lamar Jackson at number 1. They had Russell Wilson at number 2, Aaron Donald at number 3, and Patrick Mahomes at number 4. And, I mean, I want to ask Big C, what is Big C's thoughts on Big C's top 5 NFL football players? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, when you look at that list, it's a very credible list. I mean, it's hard to debate it. Lamar Jackson, the reigning MVP of the league, and when you go around and you pool players, they say he's a game changer. You've never seen anything like him.
Yeah.
And we've all seen quarterbacks throw the ball like Patrick Mahomes and Russell Wilson. We've seen that. What Aaron Donald has done on the landscape of the defensive line to change the narrative that you have to game scheme for him as an offense is something that's unique. You know, when I think about those top four, I think they're pretty well solid.
Yeah.
You know, Patrick Mahomes, everybody said, well, he's been an MVP and a Super Bowl champ. Well, his second year as a starter was not as good as his first year as a starter also. So that's what made him drop down the list. But, you know, when I look at that number 5 spot, Charlton, I have to find a receiver. And in the past 4 years in the NFL, there's been no receiver more dominant than Michael Thomas down in New Orleans.
Yeah.
When you look at the record-breaking pace that he's been on, Charlton, and even last year setting a record of 149 receptions, you don't do that just walking through the park, Charlton.
No.
I mean, that's putting in your work, and defense is having the scheme for you.
Yeah.
So I don't have a problem with the list because those players, Charlton, each week when they go out, they're part of the determining factor of what's going to occur in the ball game as far as its outcome.
Yeah. I mean, outcomes are one thing, and sometimes there's an eyeball test. You ever ask someone, like, why did you leave your last team to play for a different team? You know, sometimes people get cut, they get traded, they get drafted, whatever it is. Some people get drafted and they hold out. But you got to see people perform on the field. I'll never forget what Jimmy Johnson, former coach of the Miami Hurricanes and also the Dallas Cowboys, said, as well as the Miami Dolphins at one time. He just wants guys who can play. And you really can't go wrong with anyone on that list. But I just like seeing guys that can play. And when I think of Henry, how he carried the load for the Tennessee Titans in the playoffs, the only thing that stopped them was running into the defense of the Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. But I look at Henry as a guy who can, if you're going to get in the playoffs, you're running for 190 yards a game in the playoff, he has to be somebody's top something, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I mean, what he did in the first 2 rounds of the playoffs, but you got to also understand, when he got to Kansas City, they had one of the most poorest run defenses in the NFL, and they shut him down in the playoffs. Big-time players, Charlton, make big-time plays in big-time games.
Yeah.
That's something Derrick Henry did not do in the AFC Championship, just like Lamar Jackson did do it in the first round of the AFC playoffs, Charlton, when he was knocked out.
Yeah.
But he did win the league MVP. You look at what Russell Wilson has done since he's been in the NFL. He's never had a losing season. You look on the defensive line. I don't know if there's ever been a defensive line that's as impactful as Aaron Donald. He can play all 4 positions on the D-line, and you have to pay attention to where he lines up.
Yeah.
And when Michael Thomas goes out and catches 149 footballs during the regular season, and he didn't even play in the second half of that last game where he broke the record at 149, Charlton, where he may have had another 7 to 8 receptions if he had played more. So these are impactful players that every game they are there. And when you think about the run that Derrick Henry went on, Charlton, he went on that run late in the season. Otherwise, Nick Chubb would have been the rushing title champion in Cleveland.
Yeah, that's true. And Cleveland didn't get anywhere near the playoffs, and Tennessee did. I mean, there's so many good players in this league. That's what I love about the NFL, and we always just pay homage to the great players, Big C. I want to tell you can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. So many applications you can follow Big C Sports, and I really appreciate the way things are going with Big C Sports. I wish I could have gotten some of that same advice Michael Jackson gave one of the big-time rappers about how to structure his contracts, because he really did a good thing in saving him. I want to touch on, before we close in the next few minutes, Big C, of course, U.S. Representative John Lewis, being laid to rest. Some great presidents, former presidents, Obama and Bush and Clinton. It's like that diamond that you lost. Everybody has something to overcome. Nobody's perfect. But you really know when you miss class, especially when you haven't seen class in about 3.5 years, Big C. But something John Lewis stood for, and something you always talk about, and I know people listen. I know a lot of rappers listen. The minority markets, they have about 3.9 trillion with a T dollars in buying power. It's the multicultural economy. You think about it. Every racial and ethnic minority group in America is making financial gains, but not at equal rates, according to the latest multicultural economy report from the University of Georgia, down south, where Lewis grew up, Big C. And when you think about it, where there's African Americans, Asian Americans, Hispanic Americans, Native Americans, that multicultural economy is about $3.9 trillion. And when people think there's not enough money to do things together, there's a lot of money. There's just not as much direction and unity. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, I want to go to a point where you talk about losing something. People who think that they lost John Lewis is like saying you lost the education that you got while you were in school.
Yeah.
Is that you did not pay attention. And that's how I look at it when people say we lost John Lewis. We didn't lose John Lewis. John Lewis spent his life educating you and others around him doing the same thing. And if you did not pay attention to the education that you lost, that you were getting from John Lewis, then you're a void individual, that you did not pay attention to what was ahead of you and what you needed to accomplish, is that you were sitting in the wings wanting somebody else to open the door for you.
Yeah.
So that's what I look at when people say we lost John Lewis. We didn't lose John Lewis. John Lewis was a teacher. Every teacher I ever had in school, I didn't lose them. I just moved on from them, Charlton.
Yeah.
But they gave me a platform to understand and appreciate, just as John Lewis did. And that's what people need to think about. We didn't lose John Lewis. He was an educator. And just like in school, Charlton, everyone doesn't choose to get an education. They're just there to spend time.
Yeah.
And if you were with John Lewis and you knew about John Lewis and you took the time to get the education that John Lewis was laying out there for you, then you're better off today than what you were before.
Yeah. I think it's about just progressing. No one's going to live forever. We just want to live a good life, and sharing what we know is going to help the next generation live an even better life, as opposed to saying, hey, I pulled myself up by the bootstraps. Pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. Nobody does it on their own. Just like John Lewis opined, venture capitalists, Big C, who invest in the black community will make money. Entertainment industry, music is dominated by black Americans. The culture, a little bit of mainstream has helped, but not as much when you talk about venture capitalists and people who can grow and help you grow your organization and put money and investments behind you. Just like John Lewis, I hope that more people, and like the rapper that I'm not going to mention his name, then he went and got some advice, and it was Michael Jackson that opined to him how you could take what you have and make more money. Like you always say to the league, at least look into owning the league, forming your own league. Because when the guys that pay your paycheck, when they need more money, they collectively go to the bank because of factoring, and they can get the money that they're going to lose by fans not coming to the game. Big C, that make any sense? Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, this is where, when I was talking about the education, you think about all the teachers you had in school and what you learned.
Yeah.
You think about the first teacher that you had in life, which is your parents.
Yeah.
And they start teaching you. Once you're not with them anymore, you don't take all of what they taught you and just throw it in the trash when you walk out the door.
Yeah.
You took that as part of the foundation of your life and understanding. And so if you take what everybody puts in front of you to give you an opportunity to do and be better, you have an opportunity to be successful.
Yeah, and it comes from sharing knowledge with everybody as much as humanly possible. I'll say it again in honor of John Lewis. When it comes to equality in sports aside, minorities have a market of $3.9 trillion in buying power. Often the money is spent in communities and in banks with biases that don't lend out as often as they take in from minorities. I talked about the black farmers across the Midwest. They cannot get USDA loans, and when they do, it takes them over a year to get them, when oftentimes the white farm landowners, they will get them in about 30 days. Same land, same areas, same cities, same cows, same pigs, same chicken, but they're saying no. And so that's just something we got to look in when you put money in the bank and they won't give it back to you. I know people got to do what they want to do with that when it comes to that. I want to just close out.
It's called those senators, Charlton, on Capitol Hill.
Yeah.
As I constantly reiterate, those guys have the power to say whether or not you will get it. Steve Mnuchin, Secretary of the Treasury, they all have something in common, the same complexion, Charlton, and they hold back. You can call it redlining all you want.
Yeah.
It comes down to racism, that we don't want you to obtain equality.
Yep. Well, there's $3.9 trillion that doesn't need his help. And that's about the lack of communication that doesn't happen in our community. A lot of rap guys, they know what it's like. You go to certain people, they're going to keep you poor. You get the better advice, you're going to learn your own label. I think that's happened in the last 20 years for a lot of men of color. We talk about sports. We talked about John Lewis. I hope, the scorpion and the frog. Everyone in life has a scorpion and a frog experience. You got to know who the scorpion is, and you got to know who the frog is, and that way you don't get stung. Big C, back in the day, there was a man by the name of Drew Boudini Brown. He was known as Muhammad Ali's right-hand man, and he would always tell Ali, with all you got to use, how can you lose? Rumble, young man, rumble. Big C, what are you looking forward to in the sports universe?
Well, Charlton, is a Thursday night, 4 days away from Monday, opening night of the NBA season. I'm wondering by the time we get to Monday, how many more sports teams will have come down with COVID-19 and had to put a pause on their season. And one thing that we don't ever want to see a pause on is our frontline healthcare workers, with all the admirable work that they do every day, Charlton. The nurses, doctors, first responders, they are a proud and strong people, Charlton. And please stay safe and help keep America healthy.
Keep America healthy. Everybody stay healthy, wealthy, and wise every Monday through Friday at 5 and 6 p.m. worldwide when you follow Big C Sports on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. As we always tell you, there's never, ever an excuse for racism or domestic violence. If you know any man, woman, or child going through that garbage, please pick up the phone and call 911, because no man, woman, or child should ever have to go through that garbage on their own. And as we always tell you on every Big C Sports show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.